The morning sun cast long shadows across the crystalline spires of New Geneva when the first transmission arrived. Ambassador Sarah Chun was reviewing trade agreements in her office when her assistant burst through the door, face pale with urgency. "Ma'am, we're receiving an encrypted signal from the Outer Rim. It's from humanity." Sarah's coffee cup froze halfway to her lips. Humanity had been silent for over 2 decades, ever since the Galactic Empire had declared them a minor species unworthy of Confederation status. The last anyone had heard, Earth and its colonies were struggling to survive after the Empire's economic blockade. "Put it through to the main conference room," Sarah ordered, her heart racing. "And contact the other ambassadors immediately." Within minutes, representatives from across the galaxy gathered in the chamber. The Zephyrians with their elegant tentacles, the rock-like Garathi, the insect-like Vexhi, all species that had bent the knee to the Terran Empire's overwhelming military might generations ago. They had learned to accept their place in the cosmic hierarchy, trading freedom for safety. The holographic display flickered to life, revealing a human woman with steel-gray hair and eyes that had seen too much. She wore a simple military uniform, no decorations or insignia of rank visible. "This is Admiral Elena Rodriguez of the Human Defense Coalition," she began, her voice carrying across the vast chamber. "We are transmitting this message to all sentient species in the galaxy. Approximately 72 hours ago, the Terran Empire launched a surprise attack on our outer colonies." Gasps echoed through the chamber. The Empire attacking anyone was unusual. They typically preferred intimidation and economic pressure to outright warfare. 17 million civilians died in the first wave, Rodriguez continued, her expression never wavering. "The Empire deployed their Omega-class dreadnoughts against our mining stations and research outposts. They showed no mercy to unarmed families, to children who had never even seen a weapon." Ambassador Thexera of the Vexhi spoke first, her mandibles clicking nervously. "Surely this is some misunderstanding. The Empire does not engage in unprovoked aggression against member species. We are not member species," Rodriguez interrupted quietly. "We never were. The Empire made that very clear when they rejected our application for Confederation status 23 years ago. They called us violent primitives who would contaminate the peaceful order of galactic civilization." Sarah Chun felt a chill run down her spine. She remembered that debate in the Galactic Senate. The human delegation had stood before them, offering their knowledge, their resources, their friendship. The Empire had dismissed them with casual cruelty, claiming humanity's history of warfare made them unsuitable for galactic society. "The survivors of the attack managed to send us detailed intelligence before they died," Rodriguez continued. "The Empire is moving on all human settlements systematically. This is not a police action or a territorial dispute. This is extermination." The chamber fell silent. Even the normally chattering Kabari delegates sat frozen, their feathers rigid with shock. "We are sharing this information for one reason," Rodriguez said, leaning forward slightly. "Because what the Empire is doing to us today, they will do to you tomorrow. Some of you have heard the whispers, entire species that simply vanish from galactic records. The Altarians, the Simru Collective, the Blue Star Federation. Where did they go?" Ambassador Gorak of the Stone People shifted uncomfortably, his rocky features creaking. "The Empire said they relocated voluntarily to new territories. There are no new territories, Ambassador Gorak." Rodriguez's voice remained steady, but there was an edge to it now. "We spent the last 20 years exploring the far reaches of space. We've mapped systems the Empire claims are uninhabited. We found graveyards, Gorak, entire worlds stripped of life, their atmospheres burned away by orbital bombardment, billions of souls reduced to ash and memory." The silence that followed was deafening. These were species that had known peace for generations under the Empire's protection. The idea that their protector was actually their greatest threat was almost incomprehensible. "You speak of things that cannot be proven," declared Minister Vorthak of the Hegemony, his multiple eyes blinking in sequence. "The Empire maintains order. They have given us prosperity, safety. They have given you chains," Rodriguez said softly. "Beautiful, comfortable chains that you mistake for jewelry. But chains nonetheless. Your people live where the Empire allows, work in the industries the Empire approves, think the thoughts the Empire permits. When did any of your species last produce a new work of art? When did you last make a scientific discovery that wasn't immediately claimed by Imperial researchers? The questions hit home. Sarah Chun thought of her own people, the Altarians' descendants who had been relocated to serve as agricultural workers on Imperial worlds. When had they last sung their ancient songs? When had they last celebrated their traditional festivals without Imperial oversight? We are not asking you to fight, Rodriguez continued. Humanity learned long ago that we stand alone against the darkness. But we are warning you. The Empire's appetite is endless, and they are running out of distant targets. Sooner or later, they will decide that even loyal subjects consume too many resources. She paused, and for the first time, emotion flickered across her features. In approximately 6 hours, the Imperial fleet will arrive at Earth. They outnumber us 30-1. By all reasonable calculations, they will complete their genocide within days. But we want the galaxy to know that we did not go quietly into the void. The transmission began to break up, interference patterns dancing across the display. If any of you survive what's coming, remember this message. Remember that there was once a species called humanity that refused to kneel. Remember that we tried to warn you. Rodriguez's image solidified one last time. Run while you can. The display went dark. In the silence that followed, Ambassador Chen realized she was crying. Around her, other delegates sat in stunned contemplation. For the first time in generations, they were forced to confront an uncomfortable truth. Their peaceful existence had been built on the bones of those who dared to resist. And, somewhere in the depths of space, the Imperial fleet continued its inexorable advance toward Earth. Admiral Zarathul stood on the bridge of the Imperial flagship Eternal Dominion, watching the blue-white star that housed the human homeworld grow larger in the view screen. His 4 arms moved with practiced precision across the command interface, coordinating the largest fleet assembled in Imperial history. 375 vessels of the line, each one capable of reducing a planet to molten slag. Admiral, his second-in-command reported, long-range sensors detect approximately 12 human vessels in the outer system. They appear to be maintaining position near the 6th planet. Zarathul's mandibles clicked in what might have been amusement. 12 ships? The intelligence reports suggested they had at least 50 vessels in their defense fleet. Perhaps they've already evacuated most of their forces, suggested Commander Thane, the human-looking alien who served as the Admiral's tactical advisor. Despite his appearance, Thane was actually a chameleon-class synthetic, one of the Empire's most sophisticated infiltration units. No, Zarathul mused, studying the tactical display. Humans are notoriously stubborn. They would not abandon their homeworld so easily. This feels deliberate. As if summoned by his words, a new contact appeared on the sensors. A single human vessel, barely larger than a corvette, was approaching the Imperial fleet directly. "Sir, we're receiving a transmission from the human vessel," the communications officer announced. "Put it through." The main screen flickered to life, revealing a young human woman in a simple flight suit. Her dark hair was pulled back in a practical ponytail, and her brown eyes held no fear despite facing overwhelming odds. "Imperial fleet, this is Captain Maria Santos of the independent vessel Defiance. I'm here to talk." Zarathul leaned forward, intrigued despite himself. "You wish to negotiate a surrender?" Santos shook her head. "I'm here to make you an offer. Turn your fleet around and leave this system peacefully, and we'll pretend this whole thing never happened." The bridge fell silent. Even the normally chattering bridge crew stopped their work to stare at the screen. A single human in a tiny ship was offering terms to the most powerful military force in the galaxy. Commander Thane recovered first, his artificial composure slipping slightly. "Captain Santos, you are facing the combined might of the Terran Empire. Your entire species is outnumbered and outgunned by factors you cannot even comprehend. Perhaps you should reconsider your position." "Oh, I've considered it very carefully," Santos replied, leaning back in her pilot's chair with casual confidence. "See, the thing about humans is that we've always been really good at 2 things: learning from our mistakes and holding grudges. You taught us both lessons very thoroughly over the past 20 years. She gestured to something off-screen. 20 years ago, when you rejected our application for Confederation membership, You called us violent primitives. You said we were too aggressive, too unpredictable, too dangerous for civilized society. Funny thing is, you were absolutely right. Admiral Zarathul felt the first stirrings of unease. There was something in the human's tone, a confidence that seemed wildly disproportionate to her situation. During those 20 years of isolation, Santos continued, we had a lot of time to think. And what we thought about most was why you were so afraid of us. After all, our technology was centuries behind yours. Our military was a joke compared to the Imperial Navy. Our economy was barely space age. So what exactly were you afraid of? She smiled, and Zarathul realized it was not a pleasant expression. Then we figured it out. It wasn't what we were that scared of you. It was what we might become. See, every other species in the galaxy follows the same basic pattern. They develop technology, they achieve spaceflight, they encounter the Empire, and they submit. Clean, orderly, predictable. But humans? We have this nasty habit of refusing to stay down when we're beaten. On the tactical display, the 12 human ships near the outer planet began moving. Not toward the Imperial fleet, but into formation around what appeared to be empty space. Captain Santos, Zarathul said slowly, you are stalling for time. But time for what? Your small fleet cannot hope to. Admiral, with respect, you're thinking like an Imperial officer. You're thinking about fleets and formations and traditional naval tactics. Santos's smile widened. But humans don't fight traditional wars. We fight the wars we can win. Suddenly, alarms began blaring throughout the Imperial flagship. Sensor operators called out in confusion as new contacts appeared throughout the system. Not ships, but some kind of massive structures materializing from what appeared to be empty space. What is the meaning of this? Zarathul demanded, his 4 arms working frantically to process the incoming data. Stealth technology, Santos explained conversationally. Took us about 15 years to perfect it, but we finally managed to hide entire space stations from your sensors. Turns out, when you're not worried about keeping your economy running or maintaining trade relationships, you can focus all your resources on very specific problems. The structures, dozens of them scattered throughout the system, were massive. Each one was easily the size of an Imperial battle station, but their configuration was unlike anything in the galactic databases. Those are weapons platforms, Commander Thane said quietly, his synthetic features pale. The energy readings are unprecedented. We call them Vengeance-class stations, Santos said helpfully. Each one is capable of generating approximately 50 times the destructive power of your largest dreadnought. We have 47 of them positioned throughout the system. The math was staggering. Even divided among the entire Imperial fleet, the firepower advantage had just shifted dramatically in humanity's favor. But here's the really interesting part, Santos continued, seemingly oblivious to the panic spreading across the Imperial bridge. These weapons don't just destroy ships. They're designed to completely sterilize anything they target. Every molecule, every atom completely scattered. No wreckage, no survivors, no evidence that you were ever here. Admiral Zarathul's mandibles clicked rapidly, a sign of extreme agitation among his species. You are bluffing. No species would invest resources in such excessive firepower without a reason to use it. Santos finished. Admiral, 17 million of my people are dead. 17 million civilians who never hurt anyone, who just wanted to live their lives in peace. You killed them because it was convenient, because it sent a message, because you could. Her voice remained conversational, but something cold had entered her eyes. We built these weapons for one specific purpose, to make sure that anyone who attacks humanity learns to regret it. Permanently. On the tactical display, the human vessels began transmitting targeting data to the massive weapons platforms. Lock-on indicators appeared around every Imperial ship simultaneously. So here's my offer one more time, Santos said. Turn around. Leave this system. Return to your empire and tell them that Earth is off limits. Do this, and you'll live to see another day. And if we refuse? Zarathul asked, though he suspected he already knew the answer. Santos's smile vanished completely. Then, you'll discover exactly why the Empire was right to be afraid of us. And after we're done with your fleet, we'll start paying visits to every Imperial world that participated in the attack on our colonies, starting with the shipyards that built these vessels. The bridge fell silent except for the steady beeping of targeting systems. 375 Imperial vessels faced 47 human weapons platforms, and for the first time in the Empire's history, the math was not in their favor. "Your move, Admiral," Santos said quietly. Admiral Zarathol stared at the tactical display, calculating odds, weighing options, and coming to the uncomfortable realization that humanity had spent 20 years preparing for exactly this moment. They had not been hiding in fear. They had been sharpening their claws. And now those claws were pointed directly at his throat. Emperor Valdris the Eternal paced the length of his throne room, his massive form casting shadows across the polished obsidian floor. At nearly 3 meters tall and covered in the ceremonial scales of his ancestors, he was an imposing figure even among his own species. But today, for the first time in his 1,000-year reign, he felt something he had almost forgotten: uncertainty. "Explain to me again," he said to the trembling communications officer, "how an entire Imperial fleet simply vanished." The officer, a member of the insect-like Vexhi species, clicked his mandibles nervously. "Your Majesty, Admiral Zarathol's last transmission was received 47 hours ago. He reported that the human homeworld was within weapons range, and that the operation would commence within the hour. Since then, silence. Complete silence. Yes, Your Majesty. No distress signals, no battle reports, no automated beacon transmissions. It is as if the entire fleet simply ceased to exist." Valdris stopped pacing. In over 2 millennia of Imperial history, no fleet of that size had ever been completely destroyed without so much as a single ship escaping to report the outcome. It was impossible. It was unthinkable. What of our intelligence assets in the human territories? Also silent, Your Majesty. Our last reports indicated that humanity possessed perhaps 50 vessels total, most of them outdated mining ships converted for military use. Their technology was assessed as being at least 2 centuries behind our own. And yet somehow they destroyed 375 ships of the line. Valdris's voice carried a dangerous edge. "Are you suggesting that our intelligence network, our military assessment protocols, and our entire understanding of human capabilities were fundamentally flawed?" The communications officer began backing toward the door. I merely report what we know, Your Majesty. Leave me." As the officer scurried away, Valdris activated the private communication system that connected him directly with the heads of the various Imperial departments. Within minutes, holograms of his most trusted advisors appeared before the throne. General Corvin, head of Imperial Military Intelligence, spoke first. "Your Majesty, I have been reviewing all available data on the human species. I believe we may have underestimated them." "Underestimated?" Valdris's laugh was harsh. "General, we sent enough firepower to sterilize a dozen worlds. How exactly does one underestimate such overwhelming force?" "By assuming that all species think like we do," interjected Dr. Synthesis, the Empire's chief xenobiologist. As a synthetic consciousness that had been studying alien behavior for over 500 years, her insights were usually invaluable. "Your Majesty, every species we have encountered follows predictable patterns. They achieve spaceflight, they establish colonies, they encounter us, they submit. It is a natural progression that has held true for millennia. And humans appear to be an anomaly. Our psychological profiles suggest they have an almost pathological inability to accept defeat. Where other species see overwhelming odds and choose survival, humans seem to view the same situation as a challenge to be overcome." Admiral Thex of the Imperial Navy leaned forward in his holographic projection. "Dr. Synthesis, that may be interesting from an academic perspective, but it does not explain how they could possibly have defeated our fleet." "Actually, it does," Dr. Synthesis replied. "Consider, for the past 20 years, humanity has been completely isolated from galactic society. No trade, no cultural exchange, no technological transfer. Every other species in the galaxy has grown comfortable under Imperial protection, but humans have been forced to develop entirely independently." She paused, accessing vast databases of information. "More troubling, our isolation has meant they have been developing their technology and strategies specifically with the Empire as their primary threat. While we have been managing a galaxy, they have been preparing for war with us. Emperor Valdris felt the temperature in the throne room seem to drop several degrees. Are you suggesting that humanity has spent 2 decades preparing to fight us? I am suggesting that they have spent 2 decades preparing to survive us, Dr. Synthesis corrected. There is a significant difference. A species preparing to fight seeks victory through superior force. A species preparing to survive finds ways to make victory so costly that the enemy retreats. General Corvin's hologram flickered as he accessed classified files. Your Majesty, I am now reviewing intelligence reports from the past decade that were previously classified as low priority. There have been unusual activities in human space. Massive energy signatures that our sensors could not identify. Construction projects of unknown purpose. Resource consumption patterns that suggested major industrial projects. And these reports were classified as low priority. Why? Because humans were considered a minor species with no strategic importance, Corvin admitted quietly. We assumed they were simply struggling to rebuild after the economic blockade. Instead, they were building weapons, Valdris said grimly. Worse than that, Your Majesty, Dr. Synthesis interjected. If my calculations are correct, they were building weapons specifically designed to counter our tactical doctrines. Think about it. Every battle we have fought for the past millennium has followed the same basic pattern. Overwhelming force, technological superiority, and the psychological impact of facing the Imperial Navy. She displayed a tactical hologram showing typical Imperial fleet formations. But what if an enemy was not impressed by our psychological warfare? What if they had developed technology specifically to neutralize our advantages? What if, instead of being terrified of the Imperial Navy, they had been eagerly waiting for us to arrive? The silence that followed was profound. These were individuals who had spent their entire careers managing an empire that had never faced a serious military challenge. The idea that they might be facing an enemy that had been specifically preparing to fight them was almost incomprehensible. There is one more thing, Your Majesty, General Corvin said quietly. I have been reviewing the transmission logs from Ambassador Rodriguez's warning to the galactic community. There was something in her phrasing that troubled me, which was, she said that humanity had found graveyards of extinct species, worlds that had been sterilized by orbital bombardment. She claimed these were species that the Empire had supposedly relocated. Emperor Valdris went very still. Those relocations are classified at the highest levels. Yes, Your Majesty. Which raises the question, how did humanity acquire that information? More troubling, what else do they know about Imperial operations? The implications were staggering. If humanity had somehow gained access to classified Imperial records, they would know about more than just military tactics. They would know about the Empire's darkest secrets, its most carefully hidden policies, its systematic elimination of species that might pose future threats. Your Majesty, Admiral Thex said slowly, if humans have been preparing specifically to fight us, and if they have access to classified Imperial intelligence, then we may not be dealing with a military conflict. What do you mean? I mean, we may be dealing with a revolution. Not just humanity rising up against the Empire, but humanity acting as a catalyst for every species that has ever submitted to Imperial rule. If they can demonstrate that the Empire can be defeated, he did not need to finish the thought. The Empire ruled through the appearance of invincibility. If that appearance was shattered, if other species began to believe they could resist, how many species have we relocated over the past millennium? Valdris asked quietly. 47 confirmed, Your Majesty. Possibly more that were handled by deep cover operations. And how many species currently serve in the Imperial Confederation? 236. Emperor Valdris sat heavily on his throne, the weight of mathematical certainty settling over him like a shroud. 236 species, each one forced into submission, each one potentially harboring resentment that had been carefully controlled through fear and dependency. If humanity could break that fear, if they could offer an alternative to Imperial rule, General Corvin, he said finally, I want every available intelligence asset focused on determining human capabilities. Dr. Synthesis, I want detailed psychological profiles on human leadership. Admiral Thex, begin reviewing our defensive postures around core Imperial worlds. Your Majesty, Thex said carefully, Are you suggesting that humanity might actually pose a threat to the Empire itself? Valdris stared at the holographic displays, showing the vast extent of his domain. Thousands of worlds, billions of subjects, the greatest empire in galactic history. All of it built on the simple principle that resistance was futile. But, somewhere in the darkness between the stars, humanity was proving that principle wrong. I am suggesting, Admiral, that we may be about to discover what happens when an unstoppable force meets an immovable object. And for the first time in my reign, I am not certain which we are. The emergency session of the Galactic Council convened in chaos. Representatives from dozens of species filled the chamber, their voices creating a cacophony of clicks, whistles, and harmonics as they debated the impossible news that had arrived just hours before. Ambassador Sarah Chun stood at her species' podium, watching the pandemonium with growing concern. The official Imperial announcement had been brief and cold. Terrorist actions by human extremists have resulted in the unfortunate loss of several Imperial vessels. The Empire regrets this outcome and continues to seek peaceful resolution. But the unofficial reports told a very different story. Order! Chancellor Vextera called, her massive crystalline form pulsing with authority. As a member of the silicon-based Eternal Council, she had presided over the galactic government for over 3 centuries. We will address these reports systematically. Ambassador Gorak of the Stone People was the first to speak, his voice rumbling like distant thunder. The Imperial News Services report the loss of several vessels to terrorist action. But our own long-range sensors detected massive energy discharges from the Sol system. The radiation signatures suggest the complete annihilation of multiple capital ships. A Kabari delegate's feathers ruffled in agitation. My people's merchant vessels were in the outer systems conducting routine trade. They report seeing the Imperial fleet arrive with over 300 ships. None of those vessels have been detected leaving the system. That's impossible, protested Minister Vorthak, his multiple eyes blinking rapidly. No force in the galaxy could destroy an Imperial fleet of that magnitude. The humans were assessed as having minimal military capabilities. Were they? Ambassador Chun asked quietly, drawing attention from across the chamber. When was the last time any of us actually visited human space? When was the last time we conducted independent verification of their capabilities? The silence that followed was telling. For 20 years, humanity had been effectively quarantined from galactic society. All information about human activities had come through Imperial channels. The Empire told us they were struggling economically, Chen continued. They told us human technology was primitive. They told us that humanity was gradually declining as a species. But what if they were wrong? What if humanity was actually doing something else during those 2 decades of isolation? Such as what? Demanded Chancellor Vextera. Before Chen could answer, a new presence appeared in the chamber. The holographic projection materialized without warning. A security breach that should have been impossible in the heavily shielded council chambers. The figure was human, a middle-aged man wearing simple work clothes. He looked tired, but his eyes held an intensity that made several delegates step back from their podiums. Such as preparing for exactly what just happened, the man said calmly. Chancellor Vextera's crystalline form pulsed with alarm. How did you penetrate our security systems? This chamber is supposed to be impenetrable to unauthorized transmissions. The human smiled sadly. Chancellor, we've been monitoring your communications for over 15 years. The Empire taught us the value of good intelligence when they infiltrated our government during the Confederation talks. We learned from their example. Who are you? Ambassador Gorak rumbled. My name is David Martinez. I speak for the Human Defense Coalition. I'm here because you deserve to know the truth about what happened in our system. The truth. Minister Vorthak's eyes blinked in sequence. The truth is that you destroyed an Imperial peacekeeping fleet through terrorist tactics. Martinez's expression hardened. Minister, that peacekeeping fleet opened fire on civilian colonies without warning. They killed 17 million unarmed people, including children who had never even seen a weapon. Would you like to see the recordings? Before anyone could respond, holographic displays appeared throughout the chamber, showing horrific footage of Imperial ships bombarding defenseless settlements. The images were crystal clear. Families running from their homes as energy beams tore through city centers. Children crying over the bodies of their parents. Entire communities reduced to ash in minutes. The chamber fell silent as delegates witnessed the systematic butchery of innocent civilians. "This is what the Empire calls peacekeeping," Martinez said quietly. "This is what they did to my people. And this is what they will do to any species that dares to resist their will." Ambassador Chun found her voice. "But how could you possibly have defeated such overwhelming force?" Martinez gestured, and the displays changed to show the massive weapons platforms that had appeared during the battle. 20 years ago, when the Empire rejected our application for Confederation membership, they made their position very clear. They said we were too violent, too unpredictable, too dangerous for galactic society. They were right. He walked between the holographic displays, his projection moving with impossible smoothness through the chamber's security fields. Every other species in the galaxy has accepted Imperial protection in exchange for freedom. You've grown comfortable, peaceful, dependent. But humans have never been comfortable with being told what we can and cannot do. So you built weapons, Chancellor Vexaros stated. "We built solutions," Martinez corrected. "Solutions to the problem of Imperial aggression. You see, when you're facing an enemy with overwhelming technological superiority, you don't try to match their technology. You make their technology irrelevant." The displays showed detailed schematics of the human weapons platforms. Each of these stations generates what we call a cascade disruption field. It doesn't just destroy matter. It unravels the fundamental forces that hold it together. Against conventional weapons and shields, it's absolutely devastating. But the resources required to build such weapons, protested a Zephyrian delegate, the industrial capacity alone would require the output of dozens of worlds. "Which is exactly what we had," Martinez replied. "While the Empire was managing thousands of worlds and hundreds of species, humanity was focused on one single goal: survival. We turned every human world into a fortress, every asteroid into a factory, every person into a soldier or an engineer or a scientist working toward the same objective." He paused, and the chamber displays shifted to show star maps. The Empire made a critical miscalculation. They assumed that isolation would weaken us. Instead, it focused us. For 20 years, we've had no distractions, no competing priorities, no political debates about resource allocation. Everything we had, everything we were, went into preparing for this moment. "And now?" Ambassador Chen asked, though she suspected she already knew the answer. "Now the real work begins," Martinez said simply. "The Empire rules through fear, through the belief that resistance is futile. But we've just proved that belief wrong. Every species in the galaxy has seen an Imperial fleet disappear without a trace. You can't unknow that knowledge." Chancellor Vextharaz's crystalline form dimmed slightly. "You're talking about revolution, about war across the entire galaxy." "I'm talking about freedom," Martinez replied. "I'm talking about every species having the right to determine its own destiny without Imperial oversight. I'm talking about ending a system that requires genocide to maintain order." The displays changed again, showing the graveyards of dead worlds that humanity had discovered. 47 species have been relocated by the Empire over the past millennium, relocated to mass graves. How many more species will suffer the same fate if nothing changes? Minister Vorthak was backing away from his podium, his multiple eyes wide with fear. "You're threatening the stability of galactic civilization. The Empire maintains order, prevents war. The Empire is the war." Martinez cut him off. "It's just been a very one-sided war until now. But that's about to change." He turned to address the full assembly. "We're not asking any of you to fight. We're not asking you to choose sides. We're simply offering you something you haven't had in generations, a choice. You can continue to accept Imperial rule, or you can reclaim your independence." "And if we choose independence, what then?" Ambassador Gorak asked. "Then you'll discover what humans discovered," Martinez said with a slight smile. "That freedom is worth fighting for. That resistance is not futile. And that sometimes the only way to achieve peace is to be prepared for war." His projection began to fade. "The Empire will respond to what happened here. They'll send more fleets, implement martial law, increase surveillance. They'll try to convince you that order is more important than freedom. But remember this moment. Remember that somewhere in the galaxy, one species refused to kneel. As his image disappeared completely, Martinez's final words echoed through the chamber. And remember that if we could do it, so can you. The silence that followed was profound. Across the chamber, delegates stared at empty air where the human projection had been, each processing the implications of what they had just witnessed. The age of imperial dominance was over. The question now was what would replace it. 6 months after the Sol incident, as historians would later call it, the galaxy had become unrecognizable. Captain Elena Rodriguez stood on the bridge of the HSV Liberation, humanity's newest and most advanced vessel, watching the tactical display with satisfaction. Around her, human and alien crew members worked side by side. Zephyrians operating communications arrays, Kabari manning navigation stations, even a few Garathi managing the massive ship's engineering systems. Captain, reported Lieutenant Commander Sarachun. The former ambassador who had joined the Human Defense Coalition after her homeworld declared independence from the Empire. We're receiving reports from 17 different systems. The pattern is consistent across all fronts. Show me. The main display shifted to show a galactic map marked with red and green indicators. The red zones, representing systems still under Imperial control, were shrinking with each passing day. The green zones, showing newly independent worlds, were spreading like wildfire across the galaxy. The Altarian Republic has successfully expelled Imperial forces from their core systems, Chun continued. The Kabari Confederation has established defensive pacts with 12 neighboring species. Even the Vexi Highs have begun producing their own weapons instead of relying on Imperial technology. Rodriguez nodded grimly. The transformation had been faster than anyone had predicted. Once the first few species had successfully resisted Imperial retaliation, the psychological barrier had collapsed completely. Fear had given way to hope, and hope had proven to be the most powerful weapon in the galaxy. What's the status of the Imperial response? Increasingly desperate, Chen replied. They've pulled garrison fleets from the outer territories to defend core worlds. Emperor Valdris has declared martial law in over 50 systems, but his forces are stretched too thin to effectively enforce it. And casualties? Chen's expression sobered, heavy on both sides. The Empire isn't giving up without a fight. But the difference is that now every species that wins a battle inspires 10 others to rise up. A new contact appeared on the tactical display, an Imperial task force emerging from hyperspace at the edge of the system. Rodriguez studied the formation, 23 ships, including 3 dreadnoughts. Under normal circumstances, it would have been more than enough to pacify any rebellious world. Signal the fleet, Rodriguez ordered. All vessels to battle stations. And patch me through to the lead Imperial ship. Within moments, the view screen showed Admiral Corvin, the former head of Imperial intelligence who now commanded one of the Empire's last mobile fleets. He looked exhausted, his usually immaculate uniform wrinkled and stained. Captain Rodriguez, Corvin said wearily, I'm here under a flag of truce. I wasn't aware the Empire recognized truces with terrorist organizations, Rodriguez replied dryly. The Empire recognizes reality when it must, Corvin admitted. Captain, this madness has to stop. The galaxy is tearing itself apart. Billions have died in the fighting. Ancient civilizations are being destroyed. Ancient civilizations built on slavery and genocide, Rodriguez countered. Admiral, your empire has had a millennium to prove it could rule with justice and mercy. Instead, you chose to rule through fear and oppression. We brought order. We brought peace. You brought submission, Rodriguez said flatly. There's a difference. Peace imposed through threat of annihilation isn't peace. It's just postponed war. Admiral Corvin was silent for a long moment. What do you want? Complete withdrawal of Imperial forces from all non-Imperial territories. Recognition of every species' right to self-determination, and full disclosure of all Imperial activities over the past millennium, including the locations of the 47 species you relocated. Those terms are impossible. The Empire cannot simply abandon its responsibilities. The Empire's only responsibility now is to its own people, Rodriguez interrupted. Every other species in the galaxy has made it clear they no longer want Imperial protection. You can accept that reality gracefully, or you can continue fighting a war you cannot win. Cannot win. Corvin's composure cracked slightly. Captain, the Empire still controls the core systems. We still have the largest fleet in the galaxy. We still have weapons that could sterilize entire sectors. And if you use those weapons, you'll prove to every sentient being that humanity was right to resist you, Rodriguez said calmly. Admiral, you're facing a revolution that spans the entire galaxy. Every time you destroy a world, 10 more species join the rebellion. Every time you impose martial law, 100 more systems declare independence. She leaned forward. The age of empires is over, Admiral. The question now is whether the transition will be relatively peaceful or absolutely catastrophic. On the tactical display, Rodriguez's fleet was moving into formation around the Imperial task force. Not aggressive positioning, but clearly surrounding them. 23 Imperial ships faced over 100 vessels from a dozen different species, all flying under the banner of the Free Galactic Alliance. How did it come to this? Corvin asked quietly. How do we lose control so completely? You never had control, Rodriguez said gently. You had compliance born of fear. But fear only works as long as people believe resistance is impossible. Once we proved it was possible, the illusion collapsed. Humans, Corvin said with something that might have been admiration. Even now, I don't understand you. Any rational species would have accepted imperial rule in exchange for safety. Maybe that's your problem, Admiral. You assumed everyone else thought like you did. But humans have this stubborn belief that some things are more important than safety, such as dignity, freedom, the right to determine our own fate. Rodriguez smiled. We'd rather die free than live as slaves, Admiral. And it turns out we're not the only species that feels that way. Admiral Corvin stared at the tactical display, watching his vastly outnumbered fleet being surrounded by enemies who had once been the Empire's loyal subjects. If I agree to your terms, if the Empire withdraws from contested territories, what guarantee do we have that this alliance of yours won't simply become the next empire? No guarantee at all, Rodriguez admitted freely. Power corrupts, Admiral. Maybe in a few generations, the Free Galactic Alliance will become just as oppressive as the Empire was. Maybe we'll face our own revolution someday. She paused. But at least we'll know that revolution is possible. At least future generations will understand that no government, no matter how powerful, has the right to rule without the consent of the governed. The Emperor will never agree to these terms. Then, the Emperor will fall with his empire, Rodriguez said simply. Admiral, I'm not negotiating with you because I need to. I'm negotiating because I'm hoping to avoid unnecessary bloodshed. But make no mistake, with or without Imperial cooperation, the revolution will continue. Admiral Corvin closed his eyes for a long moment. When he opened them, he looked like a man who had aged decades in minutes. I'll relay your terms to the Emperor. You have 72 hours, Rodriguez told him. After that, we proceed with or without his permission. As the transmission ended, Lieutenant Commander Chen approached Rodriguez's command chair. Captain, do you really think the Emperor will agree to those terms? No, Rodriguez said honestly. Valdris has ruled for over 1,000 years. The idea of voluntarily giving up power will be incomprehensible to him. He'll choose to fight to the bitter end. Then, why offer the terms at all? Rodriguez gestured toward the view screen, where Admiral Corvin's fleet was preparing to depart. Because every Imperial officer who hears those terms will know we offered a peaceful solution. When the final battles come, some of them may remember that we tried to end this without more bloodshed. And after the Empire falls, Rodriguez stood, looking out at the stars where the lights of free worlds were beginning to shine. Then, we discover whether humanity was right to believe that freedom is worth the risk of chaos. We find out if a galaxy of independent species can coexist without a boot on their necks. She smiled, thinking of the long journey that had brought them to this moment. 20 years ago, the Empire had called humanity too violent, too unpredictable, too dangerous for civilized society. They had been right about the danger, but wrong about everything else. Either way, Rodriguez said quietly, the galaxy will never be the same. In the depths of space, the Imperial fleet turned toward home, carrying with them the ultimatum that would determine the fate of the greatest empire in galactic history. Behind them, The Free Galactic Alliance continued its inexorable spread across the stars, one liberated world at a time. The Age of Empires was ending. The Age of Freedom had begun. And, somewhere in the vast darkness between the stars, humanity's warning continued to echo, "Run while you can." But now it carried a different meaning entirely. The Empire had learned too late that sometimes, when you push too hard, the universe pushes back.